The private testing ground is a fortress of steel, cold and silent. In the center sits a limited edition supercar worth tens of millions, a silent ghost. A sign hangs on the windshield. Engine dead. Charlotte Vance, a billionaire mogul, taps designer heels impatiently. Elite engineers wipe sweat, shaking their heads in defeat. In the dark corner, a single dad mechanic wipes oil-stained hands on a rag. Charlotte laughs, a sharp, cruel sound. "Start it, and I'll marry you," she mocks. The crowd erupts in laughter. A few seconds later, thunder roars from the engine, and the world stops spinning. His name is Evan Cole, 45 years old, a man whose face is a map of hard miles and heavy secrets. To the high society elite who frequent this facility, he is just a contract guy. He is the ghost in the hangar, the man who fixes the leaks, scrubs the grease from the floors, and disappears into the shadows when the real power walks in. Evan doesn't attend the board meetings. He doesn't give speeches to VIPs. He exists in the margins of power, and he likes it that way. Silence is his shield, and invisibility is his peace. Every morning, before the sun even touches the horizon, Evan is awake. He starts his day not with a stock market report, but with the smell of blueberry pancakes and the sound of a small, sleepy voice. Every afternoon, in the small glass-walled lounge near the workshop, a 9-year-old girl named Lucy sits with her textbooks. She is the center of Evan's universe, his sun and his moon. He works the late shifts, taking the low-paying maintenance jobs, just to ensure he can walk her to school every morning and be there for dinner every night. To Lucy, he is just Dad, the hero who can fix a broken bicycle, draw a perfect V12 engine on a napkin, or explain why the stars twinkle. She doesn't know that her father's name was once whispered in the most prestigious automotive labs in Europe. She doesn't know that men in expensive suits used to beg for 10 minutes of his time. 10 years ago, Evan Cole was the lead dynamics engineer for a world-renowned racing team. He was the genius who helped develop the next generation of high-performance V12 engines. He lived for the scream of the turbine, the scent of burnt rubber, and the thrill of pushing physics to its absolute limit. But then, the accident happened. His co-pilot, David, had been like a brother. Evan still remembers the exact frequency of the alarm that David couldn't hear over his own panic. Evan had begged the project directors to abort the test, but they had ignored the ghost in the metal in favor of a deadline. David died in a fireball that Evan saw every time he closed his eyes. That day, the fire in Evan's soul went out. He didn't just walk away from the lights, the fame, and the glory. He burned the map to his old life. He chose a quiet life of grease and silence, trading his 6-figure salary for peace of mind and the sacred responsibility of being a single father. He swore he would never touch a high-performance engine again. He became a ghost, a man hiding in plain sight. Charlotte Vance is his polar opposite. At 41, she is the reigning queen of Vance Global. She is brilliant, arrogant, and dangerously wealthy. She moves through the world like a storm, expecting the clouds to part whenever she approaches. She uses money like a weapon and people like tools. To Charlotte, everyone has a price and everything is a test. She believes that perfection can be bought and failure is a choice made by the weak. Today, her most prized possession is her greatest problem. A one-of-a-kind supercar, a prototype that represents the future of her brand and the survival of her family's legacy, has died. The car was supposed to be the centerpiece of a multi-billion-dollar merger signing happening in less than 2 hours. If the car doesn't start, the investors will see it as a sign of weakness, a crack in the Vance armor. Her reputation, her legacy, her very identity, it's all hanging by a thread thinner than a spider's silk. The air in the testing ground is thick with tension, smelling of ozone, expensive cologne, and pure desperation. Charlotte stands by the car, her eyes like frozen flint, watching her top engineers fail over and over again. She doesn't want an explanation. She doesn't want to hear about thermal thresholds or Software glitches. She wants a miracle. And she is running out of time. She looks at her watch, the digital display mocking her with every passing second. The factory engineering team has been at it for 5 hours. They are the best money can buy. Men and women with degrees from MIT and Oxford, people who have designed satellites and supersonic jets. They have connected every diagnostic computer known to man. The floor of the hangar is a spider web of fiber optic cables. They have checked the fuel lines, the ignition sequences, the electronic control modules. Everything on their screen says system optimal, a bright green lie that mocks their intelligence. The engine is stone cold dead. The lead engineer, a man with 3 PhDs and a nervous twitch, is trembling as he looks at Charlotte. Ms. Vance, there is no logical explanation, he stammers, wiping a bead of sweat from his upper lip. The digital brain of the car is fine. The mapping is perfect. We've replaced the sensors, we've flushed the fuel, we've even bypassed the primary starter. It just won't fire. It's as if the car has decided to stop existing. Up on the mezzanine, behind darkened one-way glass, the merger partners watch the spectacle like a twisted reality show. They didn't see a man trying to save a masterpiece. They saw a liability. Charlotte felt their collective judgment like a physical weight on her shoulders, pushing her to lash out at the easiest target in the room. Charlotte's voice rises, cutting through the hum of the cooling fans like a serrated knife. I don't pay you for logic. I pay you for motion. Logic doesn't sign mergers. Motion does. If this car isn't running in 60 minutes, you can all pack your expensive bags, clear out your desks, and find work in a bicycle shop. I will dismantle this team before sunset. She turns away in frustration, her gaze sweeping across the hangar, landing on the perimeter of the yellow safety line. There, leaning against a stack of racing tires, is Evan. He hasn't moved for an hour. He hasn't touched a tool. He has been watching the way the engine shudders, listening to the way the air intake gasps, watching the minute movements of the chassis when they try to crank it. He hasn't said a word. He just watches with the intensity of a surgeon observing a failing heart. You, Charlotte barks, pointing a diamond-encrusted finger at him. The assistant over there, the grease monkey. You've been staring at my car like it's a crossword puzzle for the last 60 minutes. Do you have an opinion? Or are you just enjoying the sight of my company burning down? Evan nods slowly, pushing himself off the tires. He doesn't look intimidated by her wealth or her rage. He looks tired, the kind of tired that comes from years of carrying a weight no one can see. I'm just a mechanic, Ms. Vance, he says, his voice low and steady. I'm not here to have an opinion. I'm here to fix the leaks in the bathroom. A few of the senior engineers let out a derisive snort. He's a contractor, ma'am, one says, trying to deflect Charlotte's anger. He handles the oil changes and the basic maintenance. He wouldn't know a piezoelectric sensor array from a spark plug. Let's not waste more time. Charlotte lets out a laugh, a cold, melodic sound that carries no warmth, only the sharp edge of a woman who has reached her breaking point. She wants to humiliate her team, to show them that even a nobody is better than their failed expertise. She strides over to Evan, stopping inches away. The scent of her $300 perfume clashes violently with the heavy smell of jet fuel and grease on his jumpsuit. I'll tell you what, she says, her voice loud enough for every board member and investor to hear. Since my experts are useless, let's make a bet. A spectacular bet for a spectacular failure. If you can start this engine, right now, in front of everyone, I'll marry you. I'll make you the king of Vance Global. I'll give you half the company and you'll never have to touch a wrench again. You can trade that jumpsuit for a silk suit and spend the rest of your life in a penthouse. The hangar erupts in laughter. The engineers are doubling over, mocking Evan with their eyes. It's a cruel, sharp joke. A billionaire queen offering her hand to a beggar. They see Evan as a nobody, a man who lives in a world of scrap metal and dirty rags. They wait for him to blush, to stammer, to shrink away in shame. But Evan doesn't flinch. He doesn't look at her heels, her jewelry, or her power. He looks her directly in the eye, and for a split second, the laughter in the room dies. Charlotte feels a shiver of genuine, unexpected fear. His eyes aren't the eyes of a tofu. They are the eyes of someone who has looked into the abyss and didn't blink. They are the eyes of a master who has been insulted by an amateur. "I don't need a wife, Ms. Vance," Evan says, his voice like cold iron hitting concrete. "And I don't need your money. Money doesn't make an engine run, and power doesn't make it sing. But I hate to see a good machine being treated like a piece of junk just because the people in charge are deaf. It's a crime against engineering." The silence that follows is deafening. The board members stop whispering. The engineers stop smirking. "Give me 5 minutes," Evan continues, stepping over the safety line. "I need everyone to step back, 10 feet. I need total silence. No computers, no tablets, no whispering about stock prices, just 5 minutes of peace." Charlotte's face flushes with a mix of anger and intense curiosity. She looks at the clock. She looks at the impossible car. She shrugs, a predatory smile on her lips. "Fine, 5 minutes. The stage is yours. Your Majesty, let's see what a miracle looks like before I fire everyone in this building." Evan walks toward the car with a slow, deliberate grace. He doesn't grab a laptop. He doesn't reach for a diagnostic cable. He doesn't even put on a pair of gloves. The engineers whisper and mock him from the sidelines, but Evan doesn't hear them. He has entered a zone that no computer can reach, a place where man and machine are one. He opens the massive carbon fiber hood. The engine is a work of art, a masterpiece of polished titanium, braided steel, and gold leaf heat shielding. But to Evan, it's not art. It's a living thing that is suffocating. He leans in, closing his eyes. He doesn't look at the engine. He feels it. He places his bare palm against the intake manifold, feeling the residual heat of the previous failed attempts. He is feeling the vibration of the cooling fans, the way the air moves through the vents. He doesn't look at the screens. He listens. He is listening to the sound of metal cooling, the tiny, almost microscopic tinks and clacks of the thermal expansion. He hears the wind whistling through the intake valves. He is searching for a rhythm, a heartbeat that has been knocked out of sync. And then he hears it, a tiny, rhythmic, metallic friction that shouldn't be there. It's a sound no computer sensor is programmed to detect because it's too small for the digital threshold. "The mechanical phase is off," he mutters to himself, his voice a low growl. He realizes what the computers missed. The car had been shut down hot during the previous event in the city. The smart systems, designed to protect the engine, had engaged a safety lock on the secondary camshaft. But there was a mechanical lag, a 0.5 millimeter misalignment caused by a tiny, unshielded titanium pin that had expanded just enough to jam. As Evan adjusted the pin, his mind flashed back to the blueprints he had drafted in a fever dream a decade ago. He knew the exact thermal expansion coefficient of every alloy in this block. It was a beautiful, dangerous flaw, one he had explicitly warned about in his final report to the Racing Commission, but one that was now his alone to correct. Evan reaches into his back pocket and pulls out a single, worn-out adjustable wrench, the same one he uses to fix Lucy's bike. The engineers start to laugh again. He's going to fix a $30 million prototype with a hand tool? Is he insane? He's going to break the calibration. Evan ignores them. He reaches deep into the engine bay, his arm disappearing past the elbow into a maze of high-tension wires and fuel rails. He isn't guessing. He is navigating by memory, by the feel of the bolts he once helped design. He is back in the lab, back in the days when he was the king of the 512. He finds the pin. He feels the tension, the exact amount of resistance. He applies exactly 12 pounds of torque, a physical adjustment based on pure feel, a skill that no AI can replicate. He hears a tiny, sharp click. The mechanical lock is released. The engine breathes for the first time in hours. He doesn't stop there. He adjusts the tensioner on the secondary belt, setting it back to the original. Old school calibration that the new team had optimized away, not realizing they were choking the high-end torque. He tightens a single bolt on the fuel rail that was vibrating just enough to cause a micro leak that the sensors were ignoring. He finishes. He wipes a smear of grease from the intake with his rag, making sure the machine is pristine. He steps back, his breathing heavy, his hands steady. He doesn't look like a mechanic anymore. He looks like a master. He doesn't say, "It's fixed." He doesn't look at Charlotte. He simply gives a small, almost imperceptible nod to the pilot sitting in the cockpit. "Try it," he says, his voice cutting through the silence like a gunshot. Charlotte stands with her arms crossed, her lip curled in a sneer. She is ready to deliver the final insult. She is ready to fire him and humiliate him in front of the world for wasting her last 5 minutes. She is ready to see him crawl. The pilot hits the ignition button. For a heartbeat, there is silence. A silence so heavy it feels like the air has been sucked out of the room. And then, the world explodes. The V12 engine doesn't just start, it barks to life with a ferocious, terrifying roar that rattles the windows of the hangar and sends a shockwave through the concrete floor. It is a deep, guttural, perfect sound. There is no stutter. There is no smoke. It doesn't sound like a car. It sounds like thunder trapped in a box. A pure, raw scream of 12 cylinders working in perfect, mechanical harmony. The roar echoes off the steel walls. A symphony of power that makes the hair on everyone's arms stand up. The engineers drop their tablets. Their mouths are literally hanging open. The system ready light on the dashboard isn't just green. It's glowing with a truth they couldn't find in all their billions of lines of code. Evan doesn't cheer. He doesn't look for applause. He doesn't look at the board members who are now cheering. He simply picks up his rag, wipes the grease from his knuckles, and starts walking back to the corner, toward the lounge where Lucy is waiting with her books. He has done his job. He is a father again. Charlotte Vance stands frozen, her heels rooted to the spot as if they were bolted to the concrete. The roar of the engine is still humming in the background, a steady, rhythmic heartbeat of power that vibrates in her very bones. She looks at the car, then at the man who is already 10 feet away, walking back into the shadows as if he hadn't just saved her entire world. The investors are clapping. The merger is safe, but Charlotte doesn't feel victorious. She feels small. "Stop," she says, her voice lacking its usual sharp, commanding edge. "Wait." Evan stops. He doesn't turn around immediately. He looks through the glass wall of the lounge, seeing his daughter Lucy, who is watching with a proud, toothy smile. She's giving him a thumbs up. Only then does he turn back to the billionaire CEO. "You did it," Charlotte says, her voice hushed, almost a whisper. "The factory team, the best engineers in the world, said it was a fundamental design flaw. They said it was impossible. They were ready to scrap the project. What did you do? What did you find that they couldn't see?" "I just listened," Evan says simply, his voice carrying no ego. "A computer can tell you what's broken according to the code, but it can't tell you why the metal is crying. Sometimes, you have to stop looking at the screen and start looking at the soul of the machine. You optimize the heart out of it. I just gave it room to beat." Charlotte isn't looking at the car anymore. She is looking at Evan. For the first time in her life, she really sees him. She sees the scars on his knuckles, the grease under his fingernails, and the quiet, unshakable dignity in his posture. She realizes that she didn't just mock a mechanic, she mocked a master. She mocked the very brilliance she claims to represent. She signals to her assistant, a young man who is also staring in awe. "Get me the personnel file for Evan Cole. Now. I want his full background, not just the contractor paperwork, everything." 5 minutes later, the assistant returns, his face as pale as a ghost, his hands shaking as he hands a tablet to Charlotte. "Ma'am, you're going to want to see this. The system, it flagged his name at the highest level of security clearance." Charlotte scrolls through the digital documents, her eyes widening with every line. The file wasn't just a resume, it was a chronicle of genius and grief. She sees the patents for variable valve timing. She sees the design awards from the 2015 International Automotive Summit. She sees the name Evan Cole listed as the lead designer for the very engine architecture that sits inside her supercar. It noted that the Evan Cole standard was still the baseline for safety in 3 continents. He hadn't just designed an engine, he had defined an era and then sacrificed his legacy to protect the only person left who mattered. The realization hits her like a physical blow. She has been laughing at the man who created the standard. She has been mocking the architect of her own success. She has been offering a charity marriage to the king of her industry. The engineers are silent now. They have seen the file too. They look at Evan with a mix of fear and religious awe. The phones that were recording the joke are being lowered in shame. The rain begins to fall outside, a soft, rhythmic tapping on the steel roof, echoing the heartbeat of the engine. Charlotte takes off her sunglasses, revealing eyes that are filled with a sudden, humbling clarity. She walks toward Evan, stopping at a respectful distance. "You designed the original block," she says, her voice trembling slightly. "You're the ghost of the V12. Why are you here, scrubbing floors and fixing toilets in my hangar?" Evan looks at his grease-stained hands, then at Lucy in the lounge. "Because floors don't explode when you make a mistake, Miss Vance. And because a ghost doesn't have to worry about a legacy or a stock price, I'm just a father now. That's the only title that doesn't have a shelf life." The merger signing was a monumental success. The supercar performed flawlessly for the investors, a symbol of Vance Global's miraculous engineering and future vision. But in the quiet hours after the event, when the VIPs had gone, the champagne was flat, and the hangar was empty, Charlotte Vance didn't go home to her penthouse. She didn't call her lawyers. She went back to the workshop. She found Evan in the break room, sitting on a plastic chair, packing his daughter's lunchbox for the next day. Lucy was sitting on the table, swinging her legs and telling him about her math test, her voice filled with excitement. Charlotte stepped into the room. No longer the predator. She looked smaller, more human. She had changed out of her heels into a pair of flat shoes. "I want to apologize," she says, standing by the door, her voice cracking. "Publicly and privately. I was arrogant. I was wrong. I treated you like a tool, and you showed me what a leader actually looks like. You showed me that I've been building machines, but I've forgotten how to build respect." She pauses, taking a deep breath of the air that still smelled faintly of the thunder Evan had released. "I want to make it right, not for the cameras, but for the company. I want to offer you the position of Chief Safety and Engineering for the entire Vance Global fleet. You will have full veto power. If you say a machine isn't safe, it doesn't leave the ground. No board, no CEO, not even me, can override you. Your word will be the law." She leans in, her voice sincere, dropping the billionaire mask completely. "It comes with a salary of $3 million a year, plus stock options that will make you one of the wealthiest men in the city." Evan looks at Lucy. He looks at the offer on the table. For most men, it would be the dream of 100 lifetimes. But Evan doesn't look at the numbers. He looks at Charlotte. He sees a woman who is finally starting to listen. "What are the hours, Warnashano?" he asks. Charlotte blinks, confused. I don't understand. We can discuss the compensation package further." "I drop my daughter at school at 8:15, Evan says, his voice firm and absolute. "I pick her up at 3:30. I don't work weekends. I don't do emergency meetings in Tokyo. I don't do late-night galas. My job is to be her father, the engineering. That's just what I do for fun. If your company needs me more than she does, then you don't need me at all." Charlotte smiles, a real, soft smile that transforms her face into something beautiful. "The hours are whatever you say they are, Evan. As long as you keep my people safe, you can be wherever you need to be for her. We don't just need your brain, we need your heart." The offer was accepted. Lucy runs over to her dad, hugging his legs tightly. Evan lifts her up, taking a long, deep, easy breath. The air feels different today. It feels clean. It feels like a future where he doesn't have to hide. He looks at the supercar sitting on the pad, its turbines cooling down in the evening air. He realizes that true power isn't in the machine. It isn't in the billions. And it isn't in the seats of global authority. Not everyone who makes the thunder roar needs to sit on the throne. Some people are just happy to be the ones who know how to listen to the silence and walk their daughter home. If you believe that true ability doesn't need to be proven with noise, subscribe to follow the next stories and leave a comment. Have you ever been underestimated just because you chose to stay silent?